Hey, I'm Dave Hilowitz. So people have been asking me to do a tutorial on custom knobs. These are knobs that are styled using graphics that you provide instead of the default Kontakt knobs. Most people design UIs in Photoshop or in other graphic software, and at some point you want to have knobs that look the way you want them to look, not the way the Kontakt developers thought they should look like 15 years ago when they designed the program. So we're going to sample something weird today. If you've been following my channel, you know that in the last two videos, I made a cello basically from scratch, an actual physical cello, not a Kontakt instrument. And one of the things that I needed for that project was a real cello bow. And I ordered one from China, and this is what arrived. It's a tube that was supposed to contain a cello bow, but it actually doesn't contain anything. It's completely empty. And I got my money back. The people were actually pretty nice about it. I thought it was a pretty big bummer. I waited almost 2 months for it to arrive, and yeah, it was empty. But then I started looking at the tube, and it's a PVC tube. Not a lot of people ship things in PVC tubes. And I tapped the end of it, of course. It sounded pretty cool. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll sample it. So yeah, it's like that expression, when life gives you lemons, you should sample them. They might sound cool. So yeah, that's the plan. I'm going to sample this tube. We're going to chop it up. I'm going to make a Kontakt instrument, and then we'll make a beautiful knob for it. Okay, so I've got my samples. I've chopped them up, and I've labeled them according to the MIDI note number, and I'm ready to make a new instrument. So I'm going to move this to the left. New instrument. It's always the most exciting step. I'm going to call it PVC tube. And we're going to go into the group editor, one group, and I'm actually going to switch it to sampler already. And we're going to pull in our samples. And I'm going to actually duplicate this group so that we have a group for each round robin. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And auto map setup, and make this the key, and make this the group name. And this can be ignored, and we do apply and close, of course. And now we have 5 things. They're all on top of each other. I've selected all of them. And I'm just going to set the root keys according to their position on the keyboard. Okay, of course, this is just one key. I want it to actually be a whole range of keys. So I'm just going to go from the lower C to the upper C, from C to shining C. And then I am going to open up group start options. These are going to be round robins, and I'm going to turn off edit all groups. All these little things you have to remember to do. Okay, let's hear what it sounds like. Okay, that's a really short sample. I think we're going to want to put it in an arpeggiator or something. But okay, we'll worry about that later. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is create a knob. Before we create the knob, I think what we're going to do is we're going to create a reverb parameter. And I'm going to do it at the instrument level, not at the group level, since I have now 5 groups, and I don't want to have to redo the same work 5 times. So convolution reverb, and I'm going to choose one of the factory rooms, long haul 960, and I'm going to turn this down to, let's say, -20. Okay, that seems pretty good. It's a good starting point. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we want to create our knob assets, our actual images. And the way that Kontakt expects knobs to be delivered to it for use is in this long strip. Basically, you need to make an animation of every possible position for this knob. The more frames you have in your animation, the smoother the knob will be. Realistically, you probably want, minimum 12, maximum 100. 100 would be overkill. So, and they have to be equally spaced. And you can do this in Photoshop. You can do this using Microsoft Paint if you're a total masochist. Or you can use this program that's almost like a sort of like standard among Kontakt developers, which is called Knobman. It's a Japanese program. I'll show you the website. And there's actually an English version of this site. You can just click the little English button. And if you look down here, you see there are 3 downloads. There's a Mac download, there's an EXE, which is a Windows download, and then there's a JAR download. Apparently on later Mac OSs, the Mac version isn't working anymore. It probably is working if you know your way around permissions, but whatever. I just downloaded the JAR version because that's what it said. Most Macs have the Java runtime, which is the thing that lets you run Java apps, already installed on them. So you can just use that. Once you install it, you'll basically just get a directory that looks like this. This JAR file is the actual thing that you run. So you double click on it and it opens. It's like just like a regular app. Java apps generally don't have the best reputation. Like, we think of them as having like weird custom menu systems and the buttons all look weird and they never really quite feel like native apps. This exceeds my expectations, hugely. Also, the website shows a lot of examples of knobs. They all look really late 90s, early 2000s. Don't be put off by that. You can make any kind of knob with this software. It's actually like really great for making just like flat, sleek controls. So don't, I at first I was like, oh, this is going to be good, but it actually is really great. Okay, so it works a little bit like Photoshop or any other layer-based graphics program. You've got a knob with 3 layers, and we're going to just start here, and we're going to make a circle. The kind of knob that I want to make is one of those cool, partially filled circle knobs that are just, they're very simple, and, I just think they're great. Okay, so I'm going to make it gray. I'm going to make a little gray circle, and you can see, so here I'm specifying the kind of shape that I want, and I think I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. If you click up here, preferences, you can actually make your knob like really big. In my case, I only have 1 knob, so I want it to be huge. And I'm going to make the width of the line bigger. Yeah, that looks about right. And I'm going to go down here. And by the way, on the right side, you have all of the parameters that affect the shape. So right now we've got this one layer that has this circle, and as you can see, these are all the different frames of the animation. It doesn't change from frame to frame. They all look exactly the same. So what I want is I actually want to cut away the bottom chunk of the circle because otherwise it's not even going to be clear that this is a knob. It just kind of looks like a circle. So I'm going to grab it. And the default settings for the mask are exactly what I want. That's exactly the way I want it to look when it's fully open. To make an animation, what you do is you change these, and these little play buttons here are the indicator that this is an animation. That you actually can, I think you can have 9 different animations, or I don't fully understand this. I've never had to use any of these numbered modes. I just click play here, and this is the leftmost value, and this is the rightmost value. So if I were to change this to like that, you can see as it progresses, it's kind of disappearing, because at the end, the left will be 140 degrees and the right will be 140 degrees. That's not exactly what I want, I don't think. You can actually test the knob by going over the test tab. Okay, not exactly what I want. It's actually pretty much reversed. I think what I want is actually that. Sometimes you have to click around these tabs a bunch just to get it to re-render the thing properly. So at the start, there's nothing showing, and all the way to the right, that's 100%. Okay, so then I can make another layer, which is a text layer. And by default, I'm gonna go back to preview. It actually has like a code here where it outputs a value out of 100. So like if you were to, I mean, that obviously looks totally ridiculous, but if you wanted, you could have, I don't know, maybe in my case, I'd probably want gray text, and I'd want it to be much smaller. And then I'm going to play with this a little bit more and just kind of figure out what I want this knob to look like. And when we come back, I'll show you what it is that I've done. Okay, this is where we're at. I've made a knob I've kept that gray circle, although now I've set the alpha to 42%. So it's like semi-transparent. I think that's going to look really nice. I've made a nice gray background, which I'll show you in a second. And I've now got two layers. I've got a black layer, which is, it's not really black, it's more like gray. And then I've got another one that's white, and it's also not really white, it's more like gray. And I'll show you why I did that when we get to Kontakt. But yeah, I think that's gonna work well. I also didn't bother including numbers in my label. I just put the word reverb. That seemed right. So once we're done with our knob and we like the way it looks, we just do export image. In my case, I'm just going to export it into that same directory, and for the time being, I'm just going to put it in the root. Okay, great, we're done. Okay, so we quit out of there, and we go back to our wonderful Kontakt instrument, and whatever, I'm just going to expand this. Is there? Yeah, sounds great up there. How high can we make it go? Okay, great. We've got a whole range. Oh, I'm going to close this because that rotating knob is kind of wigging me out. And so now it's time to import our knob into the UI. And this is a weird thing. In order to be able to reference PNG files and any other graphics file, you have to make what's called a resource container. And it's basically just like a custom file format that Kontakt uses to locate assets. So the way that we do that is we hit instrument options, and you see down here where it says resource container, and right now it says none. We're going to hit create, and we're going to go to our PVC tube directory, and I'm going to make a resource container called PVC tube. Hit save, and it's going to say no resource folder structure found. Would you like to create one? Yes, definitely. And here is where it gives us a summary of the packing process. Kontakt basically looks for a specific directory structure and looks for files that are packaged a certain way, and it puts them all into the resource container. Hitting the create button is something you're going to be doing over and over again, unfortunately. It doesn't like automatically discover new files that you add to the resource folder. Okay, we're going to hit close, and I'm also going to save the instrument because, I mean, we haven't done a tremendous amount of work, but okay. So let's look at that directory now. So you'll see here we have our NKI, which is our actual Kontakt instrument. And then we've got these things, the NKC and the NKR. Those are the actual resource containers. When you ship your Kontakt library, if it's a commercial library, all you need to do is pack these three files in the samples directory. You don't actually need the resources and the data. The resources and the data are what's used by the developer to package that resource container. So the data we're not going to worry about. We don't need to do anything with the data. The resources is where we're going to do all of our work. And we're going to take this, I've made a skin, which looks like that. And I made a reverb knob, which looks like that. And by the way, this is what Knobman outputted. You can see here, it's just a massive PNG that contains every state of this knob. It's really nice to have a piece of software do that for you and not have to like manually create that in Photoshop. I know from hard experience. Okay, so we're going to take our two PNGs, our skin and our reverb knob, and we're going to go into resource. And once again, I'm going to move them into pictures. And you would think this would be enough, that Kontakt would be able to look at this, say, hey, I found some images and I imported them for you. No, you actually have to create a little text file that tells it to import these PNG files. Okay, so I'm going to pop up Sublime Text, and okay, and this is what the text file looks like. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to copy and paste this from somewhere. It's all over the net. Every tutorial about skinning knobs will have this. This is not something you're going to remember how to do, but I will take you through each of these parameters so that you know what they mean. Specifically, the top few are kind of important. So has alpha channel, that's almost always going to be yes for a knob. Basically, that's whether or not there's transparency. Yeah, most knobs are, you know, some shape on a transparent background. Number of animations is the number of frames of animation, and Knobman's default is 31. You can change it. If you're doing this by hand in Photoshop, you'll definitely know the number of frames you made. Horizontal animation is basically how your frames are laid out in that PNG file. If they're vertical, then no. If they're horizontal, then yes. Vertical resizable, horizontal resizable all has to do with whether or not things can be stretched. In this case, they're knobs. We don't want them to be stretched at all. And you don't really need to worry about the fixed top and fixed bottom things. The only thing you really need to know about this text file is A, it has to have the same name as your PNG file. So our PNG file is reverb-knob.png. Our text file is reverb-knob.txt. The other thing is you have to have a blank line at the end of the file. I don't know why, but if you don't, Kontakt doesn't find it. It doesn't find your PNG. It doesn't have an error message. It just doesn't work. Okay, so we've made our text files. We made one for the skin also, and you can see here it's a little different. It says, doesn't say that it has an alpha channel because it doesn't. It also does not have any animations. Okay, so let's go back into Kontakt, and we're gonna hit that instrument options button, and we're once again gonna hit create. And we're gonna call the resource container the same thing. And for some reason, it doesn't ever remember the file name. You just have to overwrite the previous one. And it's gonna ask you if you wanna do it, and you do. And you see here, it says packed picture files, 2. So we know that our pictures are now inside that resource container, and hopefully we won't have to do anything else. Okay, so we've pulled in our resources. We have a resource container, contains all of the pictures we need, but they're not being referenced from anywhere. We actually have to do a little bit of scripting just in order to get those assets to be pulled in, because if you look now, we don't even have a performance view. This is just a plain Kontakt library without any knobs whatsoever. So we're gonna go into our script editor, and we're gonna click edit, and we're going to begin scripting. So the first thing we do, obviously, is we're gonna have an on-init block, and we can end our on-init block here, and we're gonna do make perf view. And I'm already gonna title this script main, and we do make perf view, and hit apply, no errors, and I'm gonna do set UI height. Okay, we got a nice height there. Actually, I'm not gonna use the regular set UI height. I'm gonna use the pixel version of this. The pixel version lets us specify exact pixel amounts. So instead of saying 4 grid units, I'm gonna say 200 pixels. Otherwise, it's the same function. Gives us a little bit more vertical space. Okay, now we're going to make our knob. Now, here's the weird thing. So you probably think I'm going to do declare UI knob. Well, in theory, I should be, right? I'm making a custom knob. But Kontakt doesn't actually let you style UI knobs. It lets you style UI sliders. So every custom knob that you've seen in any commercial Kontakt library has actually secretly under the hood been a slider. So we're gonna do a slider. Declare UI slider, and I'm just doing one knob. It's called reverb. A million, you'll remember, is the maximum value for a knob or a slider or any other control, and 0 is the minimum. Okay, there's our slider. Doesn't look much like a knob. It looks like a slider, like you would expect. Okay, so what we need to do now is we need to style it, and we need to tell Kontakt, okay, I know this is a slider, but I actually want you to treat this specially. I want you to attach a special graphic to it, and I want you to position it. In order to do that, we need to get an ID code. We can't just use this reverb variable. We actually have to make a new variable that just contains an ID code that we're then going to use with other functions. I'll show you how that works out. Okay, so first I'm gonna just make this persistent just before I forget to do it later. And now we're going to retrieve that ID code. So I'm going to say reverb ID equals, and that little thing there, that colon equals, that actually means assign. So if you just said reverb ID equals, Kontakt scripting would think you were trying to compare reverb ID with something else, like inside of an if statement or something like that. So it's important that when you're assigning value, you always use colon equals. Okay, and we're going to use a function called get UI ID, and it takes one parameter, reverb. I'm actually going to pull up the manual. Okay, so first, let me show you something in the KSP manual, and that is if you look up UI slider, you actually have examples that do a lot of the stuff that we're going to do in this tutorial. This example retrieves the UI ID, which we're in the process of doing, and sets almost all of the same variables that we're about to set. You could, in theory, just copy and paste this, and you'd get to the same place that we're about to get. Okay, so we're about to use this function, get UI ID, and basically all we're doing is we're retrieving the ID number of the control. We're doing exactly what it says here. And so we've got reverb ID, which is a new variable that we're creating. We're assigning the ID to reverb ID. And next, once we have that reverb ID, we can do all kinds of manipulations on the UI. Specifically, we're going to use set control par, set control par and its a sister function set control par underscore str set different parameters of controls, and the first parameter that you're going to be passing in is always going to be that UI ID that gets retrieved by get UI ID. So we're going to put in reverb ID, and what we're doing here is we are telling the Kontakt engine manipulate the control that has this ID, and there are a bunch of specific tokens. And by the way, there's a list of all of the control parameter variables, they're called. At the end in the appendix, we are going to use control par picture, which is the picture name. And we're gonna paste that there. And I believe we called our picture Reverb Knob. Okay, and you leave off the extension. As far as Kontakt is concerned, the actual name of that image is just Reverb Knob, and the .png is kind of immaterial. And we're going to hit apply. Okay, we're getting an error. And let me look at why that might be. Oh, I see what it is. We actually didn't declare reverb ID before using it. Every variable has to be declared, so we're just going to do declare reverb ID. And now we hit apply. Okay, presto. There's our reverb knob. Okay, so a couple things. First, I want to move it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call set control par. And this time it's not underscore str because we're providing a number. The only difference between underscore str and the regular function is the regular function expects a number for that third parameter, and the underscore str expects a string or a little bit of text. So we're going to do same parameters, except we're not trying to control the picture anymore. Now we're trying to control the position. So we're actually going to use this. And I'm just going to put a random value and hit apply. Okay, it moved over. I'm going to move it over some more. Let's try 220. Really, I want it to be kind of centered. Okay, that looks pretty good. And as you can see here, there's also a Y. And by the way, there are grid versions of this. If you don't want to work in pixels, you can work in grid units also. I'd rather work in pixels. It's a little more precise. Reverb ID, and we need that all-important $sign, and maybe 30? I don't know. There's a lot of trial and error involved in this. Oh, that looks really good. It's almost invisible. Okay, I'm noticing something, and that is that when I try to use the knob and go up, which is what I'm used to doing that with knobs. I'm used to kind of mousing up on them. It's not doing anything. It actually works when I go horizontally, but not when I go vertically. So we actually can change that. We can change that behavior. Okay, and here we are in the UI slider KSP reference manual page, and that mouse behavior is actually what we want. So I'm going to copy this entire line, and we're just going to swap out ID with our actual ID, and then we're going to look up mouse par behavior. And here's the reference for that parameter. So it takes a value, -5,000 to 5,000, setting the move direction of the slider and its drag scale. Negative values give it a vertical slider behavior. That's exactly what I want. So I'm going to change this to -2,000. Hit apply. Okay, it's actually a little too fast. I'm gonna bring this down to like -500. That's perfect. The only thing left to do at this point is to hook it up to something. So we're going to do an on control block on UI control reverb. And we've done these many times in other videos too. So, and this is an easy one. We're just going to do a set engine par on that send level that we set up earlier, which is right there. So set engine par, the parameters engine par send level, specifically that send level there. So we've got the 7th parameter and we're manipulating the send level. So we hit apply and okay, it works. So what else is there to do? Let's look at the, so this looks really good, except that we don't have a background, and you basically can't see the control. So we want to set the background. And one way that you can set the background is just to do instrument wallpaper in the instrument options panel. Another way though is through code. And let's do it that way, especially since we've been using set control par so much. We're going to use that again in order to set the background. Instead of referencing that reverb ID though, we're going to reference a token that is a universal token that just means the background for the entire Kontakt library. If you look in your KSP reference manual, you'll find deep down somewhere inside of it this token, inst wallpaper ID. That's the one you want. And they have this line as like the example. This is the only way that you can use this, so you might as well just copy and paste the whole thing. And as you can see there, the first parameter there is a hardwired token that you use for setting the Kontakt wallpaper. And file name is the name that we gave it. So we're going to grab skin small text and put that in quotes because it's a little block of text, and we hit apply, and there we have it. There is our reverb control. Incidentally, I said before when we were working with Knobman that I would explain why I had done 2 circle layers. This white one is the other circle layer. The reason I needed to have 2 semicircles that are kind of opening and closing in a sort of related fashion is because otherwise it doesn't even look like a control. It basically just looks like a weird line, and you have no way of knowing that, like, oh, this is kind of a track that this little gray bar goes on. Okay, looks pretty good. I think it's time to save this before I destroy it somehow. Okay, so I've been playing with this for a little bit, and this is what I came up with. The majority of the actual sound is coming from strings, the box cello that I'm in the process of sampling. The box cello on its own sounds like this. Okay, and underneath that we have the PVC tube, which sounds like this. So yeah, that's what I came up with in a few minutes. I hope this video has been helpful to you. I'm going to put a link to the instrument in the description to the YouTube video so you can download it and play with it. I made 2 versions. I made one that's just the regular, and then one that's kind of a pad. Both instruments are going to be packaged together. I'll put a link in the description to the YouTube video. If you've been enjoying these videos, it'd be great if you'd hit the little subscribe button so you can be notified when I make more. If you've already subscribed, maybe tell a friend about the channel. Yeah, take care.